Orbiting Coruscant.
Your controls. Landing protocol 037.
Protocol 037.
What's up, MetaNerds? This was crazy to put together, but we'll look at all 72 locations on Luthen's map. When he says Protocol 037, the autopilot takes him to his shop on Coruscant. So I thought there might be at least 72 protocols for all these dots. And just because some of the points don't line up exactly, this doesn't go against the main point. And head down to the comments if you want to debate some of these locations. But a lot of the most important ones do land exactly on their planet location, like Biss, Korriban, Mimban, Mechis, and Nar Shaddaa. Really, most of them are perfect. So they clearly intended this map to be decoded, and too many of them are fitting for Luthen, with references to the Solo movie, Rebels, and tons of expanded universe stories on places important to the Rebel Alliance. From raw materials to salvage, and you'll be surprised by the amount of places that are rich in the dark side of the Force. Also, it's not a generic map of major ports. Of course, some of them are famous like Coruscant. There are so many that are far from civilized areas, like this one in the unknown regions, and places that Imperial citizens would be forbidden to travel to, like occupied Mandalorian space, Korriban, and Hutt space. And there are also tons of more famous and obvious ports that are not on this map, so we can be certain that this was personalized by Luthen. We'll start at the core, work up and out, then moving clockwise to end in the unknown regions. First, of course, there's Coruscant, which kinda needs no introduction, but then we have Skako, which points to my favorite idea behind Luthen's past, that he might be ex-separatist intelligence. Skako is one of the most important worlds in the CIS, home of the Skakoan species, with Wat Tambor heading the Techno-Union. Skako was covered in a thick methane atmosphere that was difficult even for other species that did breathe methane, just because of how dense it was. So Luthen would have to wear some sort of mask when traveling here, a world that became a smoggier Coruscant, as it too grew to be an ecumenopolis. Next we have Argao. This world was the headquarters of the Bank of Argao, which was within the intergalactic banking clan. They were known for specializing in credit transferring craft, essentially bank trucks in space, with most of the citizens here wanting to hide money or be in the circles of those with even more credits. So I can't help but think that Luthen's robbery at Aldhani wasn't the first one that he planned. And this and a couple other worlds we'll see could be his piggy bank that paid for his cover as an antiques dealer, and for all those expensive ship mods. Vulptor was one of the most ecologically devastated planets out there. It had rings of trash, continent-sized dumps, and endless factories, which produced Imperial spy droids and the KX series droids like K2SO. Pantalaman was a resort world, a giant beach town with every pleasure you could think of, attracting the rich and famous from all over, and even exporting the fun with their Pantalaman cruiser, a luxe cruise ship filled with award-winning casinos and cantinas. Likely a useful place for Luthen to meet VIPs and hide some earnings through gambling, or just rob the winners. Prakith was a volcanic fortress world, and the personal HQ of Moff Foga Bryn. This could point to a potential ally, someone under the Moff or even Brill himself being loyal to the resistance movement, but this is the first of several spots we will look at that have a surprising connection to the Force, the darkside specifically, as this is the tomb world of Darth Ndedu, and Darth Bane traveled here to acquire Ndedu's holocron. In Legends, this was the early HQ of the Inquisitorius, with Jedi survivors and Alderaan resistance fighters being imprisoned and tortured here. Biss is in the Deep Core, a world which was said to be corrupted by Darth Sidious's presence here, as this was his true throne world, and home to his secret cloning projects, a contingency that would end up keeping him alive after Andor in both Legends and canon. And Luthen could have deduced something major was happening here just due to the intense security presence, and likely the movement of unique scientists. What I find interesting is that Chandrila and Tython are not included. Posh world that was home to one of the most important resistance actors of this era, the homeworld of Mon Mothma, and also one of the oldest and important sites to the Jedi, are apparently not that important to Luthen. Ord Mantell, which was called a shadow port, crucial to criminals all over the galaxy. It was one of the most important assets to the Black Sun and then Shadow Collective, and was likely his way of staying in touch with intel gained from the underworld on changes in Imperial movements, as well as a great place to buy illegal goods. Then we have Orinda. The only major event here was the Battle of Orinda during the New Republic era, but not much before that. Then this is either Dyab or Ketum. Dyab was covered in intense electrical storms that blocked all communications from entering or exiting this world, which is why it was a perfect place for the Prism, one of the most well-hidden Jedi prisons in the galaxy. And the only notable thing about Ketum is that the Corporate Alliance had a strong presence here, and there was some CIS connection. And this is either Bogdan or Pequalis. Bogdan was home to the Bando Gora, a terror group led by the fallen Jedi Kamari Vosa, and when she was killed by Jango Fett, Dooku met him on a moon of Bogdan to offer him a contract for the clone army. This world was mostly known because of the Bando Gora, but did have some spice trade connections. While Pequalis was headquarters to the Benelux Bounty Hunters Guild, which specialized in kidnapping retrieval and carrying out Imperial arrest warrants. Generis is a world that had Rakatan temple ruins, an ancient race that based their entire civilization on the dark side. And this world had orbital bases that would prove useful to the Rebel Alliance, with native Rebel forces joining the galactic movement and constructing the Outer Rim's communication center, which became one of the most important relays out there, something that would be especially useful to communication techies like Luthen. Yaga Minor had powerful shipyards, and the Free Ryloth movement hijacked an Imperial weapons shipment and was able to flee through hyperspace, being such a high-level raid that Darth Vader had to get involved. This was also the site the Jedi Craft outbound flight launched from 5 years before the Clone Wars, and which ended up running into the Chiss. Beskane is heavily industrialized, not just in ships and vehicles, but biochemicals, fuels, and other rare chemicals too, opening up the door for all sorts of improvised explosives and compounds needed for rare ships or weapons. Cern Padal had a prominent business district and housed the residence of Darth Zorid, an Old Republic-era Sith. Burchest was home to more Imperial shipyards, specializing in yachts, and had one of the most beautiful cities, with skyscrapers cut out of salt crystals, making it one of the 20 wonders of the galaxy. This blast was the homeworld of Aporansis, and were one of the worst treated people during the Imperial reign. Bombardments and mass enslavements bred a population that would quickly join other rebel cells. Togoria voluntarily joined the CIS early in the war, and would join the rebellion. While this dot could be Trandosha or Kashyyyk, as these planets are neighbors, and I could see it being either. Kashyyyk is obvious as he wanted to track Imperial movement and work with the Wookiee rebels, as they were some of the earliest to fight back, with Tarful being legendary. But he might put the hideout on the Trandoshan world to keep it better hidden, and make powerful allies with these famed hunters. There is no intel for Charos, but Baz Pity was the nearly uninhabited world nicknamed the Graveyard Planet, and where the CIS would set up operations here, and use it as a valuable staging area to launch several successful attacks, and it would eventually be home to a Rebel Alliance base. Valmore is rather obscure, but was an early supporter of the rebellion since 17 BBY, just 2 years in, and after Alderaan was destroyed, this planet had one of the largest Alderaanian populations. The closest thing here is Gromos, another Imperial depot and mining center, this one focused on Frick, one of the few lightsaber-resistant materials, and was one of the places Birch Teller's rebel group planned on attacking, prompting a larger Imperial presence in 14 BBY. Garros has a crazy importance that I almost missed. Most of their history is on their support for refugees during the Clone Wars, later civil wars amongst themselves, then followed by an Imperial interest in heavy-handed occupation. But what finally brought the imps was that they caught on that Hebridium was being mined here, an extremely rare material that was used to develop new forms of cloaking devices. And then this is either Mandalore or Zanbar. If it's Zanbar, that's the more remote swampy world that was once the HQ of Death Watch. And if it's Mandalore, there are endless reasons why he'd want to be here. Monitoring experimental Imperial research groups, like the weapons programs Sabine would help with, and which were later used against the Mandos, or to make allies with the Mandalorians themselves, as they could prove to be the most powerful and passionate enemies of the Empire anywhere in the galaxy at this time, which is after the Night of 1,000 Tears. Bajoon is another world steeped in darkside energy, near lifeless, though it did have a fortress once owned by Count Dooku, and later Darth Vader, using it as a sort of darkside meditation retreat. So that's evidence to those thinking Luthen is some sort of force wielder, though he could just be looking for powerful and pricey relics to grow his bank with. Raydonia is odd. It is near Dathomir, so perhaps he didn't want to set up the base on the creepy witch world, but the only time we ever see Raydonia is when Maul and Savage executed human colonists in order to draw out Kenobi during the Clone Wars. Again, not sure if this is on Dathomir or Ord Cestus. There's plenty of darkside magic's reasons to go to Dathomir, even if not due to his own Force connection. He may know about their genocide and seek powerful allies like on Mandalore. Or he's just looking for relics that he could resell. If Ord Cestus, this world had Cestus Cybernetics, a subsidiary of Bactoid Combat Automata which made battle droids, and there was a major Techno-Union factory here too. So plenty of droids and tech to be stolen, though it could also be for the mushrooms. Yes, there were a powerful array of different shrooms, hitting every part of the spectrum from healing to killing, tasty for food, or powerful hallucinogens, all of which might be crucial in Luthen's spy kit. And now we get to Korriban. I love the fact that Luthen's chosen public identity as an oddities and ancient relics art dealer was such a good choice by the writers of this show that it works on me out of universe. It shows what great choice this is for cover, as we've already looked at several worlds with a unique darkside connection, and there's going to be a bunch more after this. And Korriban is one of these that lines up perfectly, and yet I still think, nah, he might just be there to rob some old Sith graves. You might think that's a buzzkill, but at least right now I hope they don't make him a Force wielder. If anything, imagine him believing reports that the Emperor was the Sith Lord, and wanting to study the enemy and find his weakness. Someone without the aid of the Force is having to brave all these haunted, dark side nexus places. like James Bond, Indiana Jones, and Van Helsing all wrapped into one, running around trying to collect all these Sith artifacts and work with others that do have a Force connection. Let me know what you think in the comments. Arda doesn't have much to note other than a presence in the ancient Zim Empire, and the natives would join the rebellion. Felucia had practical uses in its Nicillan healing herb, which was so lucrative that it attracted pirates and both the CIS and Republic. There would be tons of abandoned Commerce Guild facilities here, and the thick jungles would be a perfect place to hide a rebel cell. Iago was a planet with the beings called the Angels, spoken about by pirates all across the galaxy. The planet with 1,000 moons would be one of the best places in the galaxy to stash some items. Junkfort Station is another shadow port that Platt O'Keefe added to Maz Kanata's journal, which came to be known as the Smuggler's Guide. Seleucami was where Kutt was living, but by the time we see Luthen, Kutt would have already been evacuated with the help of Clone Force 99. But there would be tons of scrapped Clone Wars era materials here that might be salvaged. This is Malachor or Vaynai. If Malachor, our ancient Sith connections continue, as there were the ruins of the Old Republic era battle that forever changed this world into a lifeless shell, and there would be tons of lightsabers here that he could come across. And something I only just learned is that Malachor was removed from the Jedi archives in hopes of letting this dark place be lost to history, so that precedent wasn't set by Dooku. And Vaynai was known for producing incredible anti-aircraft weaponry and had ancient holy shrines, where Force sensitives report it created a sort of echo effect, something like Quinlan Voss's ability, where they were able to see things connected across time and space. Adalon was the home of the Bendu, one of the most mysterious Force wielders in history, being neither Jedi or Sith, a part of a long-lost tradition that stretched back to before the Jedi Order itself. This world would also come to have Chopper Base, the home of the Phoenix Cell. This random dot past Mon Cala, I have no clue, probably an unmapped world or even a space station. But then we have Hawk, a grand colony world which was known for its rich supply of crystals, so fitting right into his search for rare tech and relics. Hapes was the capital of the Hapes Consortium, a truly powerful and isolationist sector of space that was one of the few independent zones outside of Sidious's control. Luthen may be here to get access to weapons and tech that were unavailable in Imperial space, and even types of things that couldn't be sliced into or tracked, simply because the Imperial ships hadn't come across these native Hapes designs. And he may of course also be looking for powerful allies in the rebellion, though there's no evidence that the consortium would ever join them. Ambria is the place Darth Bane died, or at least his body died, as his apprentice Darth Zana would rise to become the new Dark Lord. It had been important to the Sith for thousands of years before this, into the 4,000 and 5,000 years BBY, when the Sith fled here after a string of Republic victories, so imagine the loot that could be found here. If this is Zeltros, this was a known hangout for Dr. Aphra, someone quite similar to Luthen in her adventures as a rogue archaeologist, and though she came to work under Vader, it was a strained relationship at best. I could definitely see these two working together, and if not, this planet was another vacation world frequented by the rich and famous. If this is Belasco that was once conquered by the Krath Holy Crusade, a faction influenced by the Sith Exar Kun, and later in the Republic era it was another spot for the ultra-wealthy, also known for having a corrupt local government. And here we have Mimban. We hear that Luthen knows the true story of Andor's service on Mimban, and this is the same mud world Han Solo was sent to. During the Clone Wars, the Mimbanese were Republic allies, but then they were deemed an enemy near instantly after Imperial transition. This was one of the worst battlefronts in the galaxy, with years of brutal fighting that helped to radicalize people on each side. Just imagine the opportunities for scavenging from CIS, Republic, Mimban, and Imperial weapons, tech, and vehicles, as well as how easy it would be to find those that were resentful towards the Empire. It wanted to continue the fight in more clandestine ways. There are these two random dots in the middle, so maybe unmapped world or space station, but then we have Makeb or Lanik. Makeb was on the edge of Hutt space, and had cities built into rock pillars and caves, making for great hideouts. It was one of the only worlds to produce Isotope 5, something that generated stronger than normal shields and blasters. Perhaps this was mixed with the ship-cutting laser in order to give the Fondor those powerful beams. While this isotope is also used to warp gravity, maybe pointing to a use for hiding the ship's gravitational signature, like I mentioned in the ship breakdown. This dot could be now Hutta or Nar Shaddaa, as Hutta is the capital of the Hutt Empire, and Shaddaa was that planet's moon and the underworld capital, which would be amazing to see in live action and would give him access to just about anything you could think of. Saki was a world long conquered by the Hutts, and there's not too many details other than the natives were a long-standing slave pool for the Hutts, whereas Quen has no intel, and Chalakta was the birthplace of Depa Billaba, in another world with a strong local force tradition with the famed Temple of Illumination. Cyboria was the site of one of the most unique Sith attacks in military history, where the Dread Masters destroyed entire fleets using an ability called Force Phantom, but any other point of interest is unknown. There's this random dot between Teth and Barab. Teth was taken over by the Empire and turned into an agri-world, one planet-sized farm, but they also built a naval base and small shipyard, placing a residence for Moff Sarn's shield here, with Teth acting as the Empire's outpost in Hutt space to make sure the mobsters understood that their autonomy was only at the permission of the Emperor, and that he could conquer all of Hutt space if he was challenged. While Barab is known for its exotic ore, and incredibly violent natives with higher than normal amounts of Force sensitives among them. Then we have Hosnian Prime, which was mentioned in the show. It was a planet-sized city like Coruscant, taking on a ton of refugees during the Imperial era and Civil War, so it acted like a mix of Alderaan and Coruscant. This could be Andara or Fondor, with Andara being of very curious importance, as the leadership school here attracted the best and brightest of the elite's children, all with hopes of using their wealth to secure the next generation in places of political power. While Fondor made up the trio of naval superpowers being Kuat, Scarif, and Fondor. It is where Luthen's ship was built, and would be crucial for keeping eyes on shifts in Imperial doctrine, as more of a certain type of ship were being built, and would give a chance to see craft before they hit the stars. He might slice into some of their comms, or maybe even board ships in production in order to study their weaknesses, and I'm sure he would be able to befriend some engineers. This is either Bestine or Folas, and 2 years after the events of this season, Bestine would be completely evacuated to make room for an Imperial shipyard. There were likely rumors of this coming years before this, and those displaced natives became one of the populations with the most conversions to the Rebel Alliance, and there isn't much info on Folas. Atziri was a major trading hub with a corrupt government, where credits could get you anything you wanted. You get these random dots, but it looks like it's trying to beat Braca, which is one of the largest shipbreaking yards out there, with every type of ship you can think of being ripped apart for salvage, from Venators to Lucrehulks. This would be one of the most important worlds for someone trying to acquire military-grade equipment, and I think it's the most likely source of his laser weapon, coming from the ship cutter. Naboo would be important for finding allies, with Naboo still traumatized by Padme's shocking death, and there was always a strong culture of independence and pacifism, which always put them at odds with the Emperor. And there was also the strange tech of the Gungans, which might be invaluable against the Imps if they didn't have countermeasures developed for them. Phaelin was home to the Phaelin species, who were most known through their powerful Black Sun crime syndicate, which at this time was under the rule of Darth Maul's Shadow Collective. Iktoch was home to the Iktashi species, which had an extremely high percentage of Force sensitives, many of whom returned home in the years before and during the Clone Wars, sensing some massive shift in the Force. It would be a great place to meet Force sensitives that might be able to utilize the ancient Sith and Jedi artifacts Luthen found, if he wasn't a Force wielder himself. And funny enough, as the civil war between rebels and Imps grew, even more Iktachi returned home, eventually prompting the Emperor to put a blockade here, with fear of all these sensitives colluding in one place. You get this random dot near Cyrilla, which was a heavily industrialized world that made the DUM pit droid. And one of my favorites was Mechas, which was crucial to the Techno Union, but also to almost every major company in some way, as it produced countless types of droids, and was protected by a mix of private warships from several different corporations. This world has both continent-sized wastelands to scavenge and continent-sized factory complexes, many with automated systems, droids making droids, like the IG-88 assassin droids. It was the IG-88 we know and love that became a bounty hunter, and then returned to raise a droid army, in fact, sparking what would become a droid revolution, where the mechanical tried to exterminate the, quote, inferior biologicals who had oppressed them for so long. This might be my favorite reference on this list, as I have been hoping for this droid revolution to be depicted since it was teased in the Han Solo movie, and since there were so many references to Solo in the Andor show, from Mimban to the Cantwell-class ship, I really think this droid revolution would be great for practical effects, and would both be distinct from so much other Star Wars media, while being a great homage to the EU. Takodana is another one that seems obvious because of the pirate outpost that was Maz Kanata's castle, which would have been in full swing at this time. But again, we see that Jedi and Sith connection, as the castle was built on the site of a long-forgotten battle between Light and Dark, which took place sometime in the Old Republic era. And it was such a great combo of opportunity and anonymity that after Order 66, Ahsoka Tano considered hiding out here at Maz's place. Catel Fard has a big art world connection with their royal dynasty and unique style of vases, which were coming to be adored during the Imperial era, but was also the site the legions of Letal trained in sword fighting. This legion was from the followers of Zendor, who was one of the first to break away from the Jedi Order, long before the Sith even existed. Bakura was another popular spaceport and banking center, and would be the site of the Rebel Alliance and Galactic Empire signing a treaty right after Endor. There's this random dot, and then Kota Station, which was so remote that it had no business being as popular as it was, but people just really liked the vibe here, and how the rowdy cantinas attracted all sorts of visitors, from local farmers to smugglers. And when the Civil War really kicked off after Yavin, many rebels would have their hideouts here. And lastly, we have Lewick, which is way off in the unknown regions, and has a species to match their far-out location. A race of sentient dinosaurs called the Seruk that would conquer their neighbors and practice magical arts, carving enchantment runes into their slaves in order to control their bodies and minds. This was different from the Force or Night Sister magics, and was odd even to the most traveled visitors. Luthen may be here to try and learn this rune power, or like with the Hapes Consortium, he may be trading with them to get tech that was so odd the imps didn't have any countermeasures. So in summary, almost all these places align with Luthen's goals, and provide useful connections and materials, from banking, corrupt politicians, salvage or high-tech industrial manufacturing, raw materials from ore to crystals, underworld connections, and places with a strong connection to the Force, mostly used by the ancient Sith. I still lean to him having no Force connection, but being some sort of intelligence officer. Personally, I think being an ex-CIS spy would be the most interesting, but there is plenty there to theorize on a Jedi or Sith past. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and join the membership for just 99 cents if you want access to our archived older videos and newer exclusive content like early access, Q&As, live streams, and behind the scenes stuff. But most important of all, remember, if he braved Korriban and Malachor without Force powers, might be the most powerful being in the galaxy, and the Force will be with you, always.